The room was not large, and it was never meant to be remembered. Stone walls held the heat of late afternoon, and the single opening near the ceiling let in a thin blade of light that shifted slowly as the sun moved. No symbols were carved into the walls. No lamps burned. Anyone looking for drama would have been disappointed. And yet everyone there felt it, the sense that something irreversible was about to happen, something that would divide their lives into before and after. Elyon stood near the center, not elevated, not posed like a teacher. He waited until the murmuring died on its own. He had learned that silence taught faster than instruction. The people around him were not strangers. They had followed him through danger, exile, and grief. They had seen what others had not. But this moment was different. This was not about witnessing. It was about participation. He looked at them one by one, slowly, as if measuring something invisible. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost conversational, the tone of someone explaining a simple task rather than unveiling a secret guarded for centuries. There is a sound, he said, that cannot be repeated by memory alone. No one interrupted him. They had learned not to. Elyon's pauses were deliberate. He let the sentence settle, then continued, "You have heard many words. You have memorized teachings. You have repeated prayers exactly as they were given to you. This is not that." He stepped closer to the first person on his left, a man called Saren, sharp-eyed, always quick to speak, quick to understand. Elyon leaned in slightly, not whispering, but lowering his voice just enough that everyone leaned forward instinctively. "I will speak it once," Elyon said. "You will try to speak it back. Not with effort. Not with belief. Simply let your breath do what it knows how to do." He produced the sound that it was brief. Barely a syllable. Not loud, not forceful. And yet the air in the room changed. A few of them felt it immediately, a pressure behind the eyes, a tightening in the chest, as if something had briefly aligned and then let go. Others felt nothing at all. Saren tried first. He repeated the sound carefully, almost perfectly. The shape was right. The timing was right. Elyon shook his head gently. "Again," he said. Saren tried again, this time with more focus, more intention. The sound sharpened, but something about it flattened, like a note played correctly but without resonance. Elyon placed a hand on Saren's chest, not pressing, just resting there. "You are reaching," he said. "That is why it collapses." He moved on without judgment. One by one, they tried. Some stumbled over the sound entirely, their mouths unable to form it. Others produced something close enough that a casual listener might not notice the difference. Elyon noticed every time. His responses were subtle, sometimes a nod, sometimes a pause, sometimes a quiet "no" that carried no disappointment. Then came Nera. She had not spoken much since the aftermath of everything. Loss had slowed her, softened her edges. When Elyon nodded for her to try, she hesitated, closed her eyes, and exhaled first, as if emptying herself. The sound came out of her without effort, not louder than the others. Not cleaner. But fuller, as if it carried depth behind it rather than shape alone. The room reacted. A few people inhaled sharply without meaning to. One person's hands began to tremble. Elyon smiled, not broadly, but with recognition. "That," he said, "is the difference between repeating and calling." Eyes turned toward Nera. She looked surprised herself, as if she hadn't decided anything consciously. Elyon addressed the group again. "This sound does not belong to language," he said. "Language borrows it. Ritual hides it. Institutions soften it until it becomes harmless. But the sound itself responds only to alignment. Someone finally spoke. Alignment with what? Elyon didn't answer immediately. He walked back to the center of the room, letting the question hang. With what you were before you learned to ask, he said finally. He explained that the sound could not be forced because it wasn't created in the throat. It passed through the throat. When someone tried to control it, to own it, it lost coherence. When someone let it move through them, it carried authority, not borrowed authority, but inherent. This is why it was never written down, Elyon said. Not because it is secret, but because it cannot survive copying. He told them this was the first separation. Not between good and evil. Not between believers and doubters. But between those who could let something pass through them unchanged, and those who always needed to shape it. The test was over. No scores were announced. No ranks assigned. And yet everyone understood that something had shifted. Some of them would spend the night trying to reproduce the sound in their minds, chasing it. Others would sit quietly, unsure why their chests still felt open. Elyon watched them carefully, knowing what came next would not be easier. Elyon did not gather them again right away. He let the evening stretch, let hunger and restlessness surface naturally. By the time they reconvened, night had settled in fully, and the thin opening near the ceiling now held only darkness. Someone lit a single lamp, more out of habit than necessity. The room already felt alert, as if sound itself were paying attention. Elyon spoke as if continuing a conversation no one remembered starting. Most people believe words work because they are heard, he said. That is backward. Words work because they are carried. He looked around the room, making sure no one mistook this for poetry. Sound is not meaning, he continued. Sound is instruction. Meaning comes later, when the mind tries to explain what already happened. A few of them shifted uncomfortably. This was unfamiliar ground. Elyon noticed and softened his tone. You've all felt it before, he said. A voice that calms you before you understand why. A tone that makes you defensive before you know what was said. That isn't emotion. That's frequency meeting resistance. He asked them to remember moments when their own voices changed unintentionally, when fear made it thin, when anger sharpened it, when certainty slowed it down. Those changes, he explained, were not symbolic. They were mechanical. Your body is an instrument, Elyon said. Your awareness decides whether it plays itself, or is played. Someone asked if this was why prayers sometimes failed. Elyon didn't reject the word, but he reframed it. Requests assume distance, he said. They assume something must travel from you to somewhere else and come back altered. The sound I gave you does not travel. It locks. He described it like two patterns clicking together. When the inner pattern was unstable, the sound slid off harmlessly. When it was aligned, the sound completed the circuit instantly. This is why force never works, he added. Force creates distortion. Authority creates coherence. They listened closely now. Even Saren, who had struggled earlier, was no longer trying to solve it. Elyon could feel the room settling into a slower rhythm. He explained that the gate word, as he called it, was not dangerous by itself. It became disruptive only in environments built on confusion. When spoken from clarity, it clarified further. When spoken from fragmentation, it echoed back that fragmentation uncomfortably. This is why it was buried, Elyon said plainly. Not by enemies alone. By caretakers who realized they could no longer mediate it. The idea landed heavily. Control through interpretation was something they all recognized in hindsight. Elyon didn't linger on blame. He rarely did. Instead, he demonstrated. He asked them to place one hand lightly on their throats, not pressing, just enough to feel vibration. Then he asked them to inhale slowly through the nose and exhale through the mouth without sound. Notice where the breath wants to pause, he said. That pause is where most people panic and fill it with effort. After a few rounds, he introduced a hum, low and unshaped, not the word itself, just the carrier wave beneath it. The room filled with overlapping tones, imperfect but steady. Something about the shared vibration changed the atmosphere again. It felt thicker, denser, but calmer. Now, Elyon said quietly, do nothing extra. He produced the gate sound again, softer this time. A few people followed instinctively, their voices slipping into it without strain. Others stopped themselves midway, surprised. Nara didn't repeat it immediately. She waited until the hum beneath it stabilized, then let the sound emerge. When it did, several people felt a subtle pressure release in their heads, like a held breath finally let go. That, Elyon said, is authority without assertion. He warned them next, not dramatically, just honestly. When you speak from this state, systems built on fear notice, he said. Not because they understand it, but because they lose grip where it passes. He described the pushback not as punishment, but as correction attempts. Doubt would appear suddenly. Fatigue without cause. Old habits resurfacing with strange urgency. This is not attack, he said. It is recalibration trying to restore the previous setting. The instruction, he emphasized, was not to fight it. Fighting re-engages the system, Elyon said. Recognition disengages it. By the end of the night, no one felt exhilarated. That surprised them. Instead, they felt steady, grounded, quietly alert. Elyon preferred it that way. Excitement burned quickly. Stability endured. That he dismissed them without ceremony. No closing words. No ritual ending. As they left in small groups, some tried the sound again under their breath. Most didn't. Elyon remained behind, listening to the room return to stillness, knowing the next phase would begin without his prompting. By the third day, the change was no longer theoretical. It had begun to show up in small, inconvenient ways. Sleep patterns shifted. Conversations felt shorter, not because there was less to say, but because fewer explanations were needed. A few of them noticed that when tension appeared, it dissolved faster, sometimes uncomfortably fast, leaving nothing to lean on. Elyon did not call this progress. He called it exposure. When the inner noise quiets, he said, what remains becomes obvious. That includes what you've been avoiding. They gathered again in the same room, this time without instruction to sit or stand in any particular way. Elyon wanted to see what they chose naturally. Most sat on the floor. A few leaned against the wall. No one hovered near him anymore. That told him enough. Today, he said, you stop repeating the sound. Several of them looked up sharply. Saren frowned. Nara tilted her head slightly, listening. You don't need repetition now, Elyon continued. Repetition trains the body. You've already done that. What you need now is assembly. He explained that the sound they had learned was incomplete on its own. It functioned like a key blank, capable, but inert unless cut correctly. The cutting, he said, happened through three components that had to align at once. Recognition, he said first. Authority. Command. He let each word land. Recognition is not belief, Elyon said. It's the moment you stop mistaking yourself for the noise you've been trained to identify with. He described it as a subtle shift, often mistaken for boredom or detachment. When internal commentary dropped away, even briefly, recognition was already happening. No effort required. Authority, he continued, is not dominance. It's responsibility. This part made some of them uneasy. Elian clarified quickly, when you speak from alignment, you are accountable for the effect, he said. That's why many prefer requests. Requests allow you to outsource consequence. Authority, he explained, meant accepting that your state shaped the outcome. No intermediaries. No buffers. Command, he said last, is simply direction without emotional charge. Not anger. Not pleading. Not hope. Direction. He showed them how these three components assembled naturally when the body was relaxed, the breath unforced, and the attention present. When any one component was missing, the sound either faded or bounced back internally, creating discomfort. This is why some of you felt resistance after practicing, Elian said. You were commanding without authority. Or recognizing without directing. He warned them again about the after effects, this time more concretely. When used daily, even quietly, the assembly would destabilize false urgency. People around them might react oddly. Old dynamics could collapse without discussion. Do not explain, Elian said firmly. Explanation is an attempt to regain control of outcomes that are no longer yours to manage. Nara asked what to do when fear arose. Elian answered without hesitation, let it speak first, he said. Then speak after. Fear, he explained, often surfaced as the last defense of familiar identity. Silencing it only fed it. Recognizing it dissolved it. Before they parted, Elian gave them one final instruction, do not turn this into identity, he said. The moment you think of yourself as someone who does this, you've already stepped out of alignment. The assembly was not a badge. It was a function. Used when needed. Forgotten when not. He did not tell them when to use it. He did not set rules. He trusted recognition to handle timing better than discipline ever could. When they left, Elian did not remain behind this time. He exited with them, indistinguishable in the low light, his presence already receding from their inner narratives. What remained was not a technique, but a quiet capacity, one that would surface precisely when the world demanded clarity instead of comfort. If you've stayed until this point, you probably noticed something. This story doesn't try to convince you of anything. It doesn't ask you to adopt a belief, follow a system, or reject one. And that's intentional. Stories like this exist to trigger recognition, not agreement. Some of you will feel unsettled after listening. Others might feel strangely calm. A few may feel nothing at all. All of those reactions are valid. What matters isn't what you felt while hearing it, but what changes in the quiet moments afterward, when there's no narration guiding you and no words filling the space. This channel isn't about answers. It's about sharpening perception. About noticing where authority has been quietly outsourced in your own life, and where it might be returning, not through force, but through clarity. If this story resonated, consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. Each video approaches the same territory from a different angle, and together they form something larger than any single narrative. If you know someone who's been questioning, drifting, or feeling the edges of something they can't name yet, share this with them. Sometimes recognition travels faster through story than explanation, and if you found value here, a simple like helps this video reach others who might need it at exactly the right moment. Thank you for listening carefully.